She was never loud. She didn't scream, didn't demand. She simply sat inside you, quietly breaking. Each time you had to shrink yourself just to be loved. You called it being kind. But deep down, it was survival. You learned to trade pieces of your soul for crumbs of affection. To be pleasing. To be small. To be what they needed. Even when it wasn't who you were. And now? You're grown. But every time someone pulls away, that same little girl still flinches. She still asks, "What did I do wrong?" What if she did nothing wrong? What if love was never something she needed to earn, but something she was always worthy of? Pause. Before we continue, take one breath. And feel the weight of all the times you made yourself smaller, just to be held. Now ask yourself, who taught you that love had to be chased? No child is born begging for love. She arrives whole. Soft. Undivided. Her heart is open like the morning sky. She doesn't yet know how to pretend. Her joy is unfiltered. Her grief, raw. Her needs, simple. And most of all, her love is not conditioned. She offers it freely, like sunlight, expecting it to return with the same purity. But what happens when the mirror she's born into does not reflect that love back? When the smile she gives does not earn a smile in return? When her cries are met not with warmth, but with silence? Or worse, with rejection? She begins to calculate. The nervous system, that ancient guardian of survival, quietly rewires itself. A child doesn't think in thoughts, she thinks in felt sense. She absorbs the temperature of the room like a sponge. She notices that when she is quiet, she is safe. When she is pleasing, she is approved. When she hides her sadness, she is less trouble. And so, the body learns. It's not a conscious choice. It's a neurobiological strategy. The amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, becomes sensitive to abandonment. The vagus nerve tightens when love feels distant. Mirror neurons, the cells that help us attune to others, begin to tune not to joy, but to tension, to inconsistency, to the emotional weather of those she depends on. She starts to perform. Not out of vanity, but out of a deep, primal need to belong. To be safe. To be loved. The authentic self begins to fragment. She wears smiles that feel tight across her face. She becomes the peacekeeper. The perfectionist. The overachiever. Or maybe the invisible girl who never dares to ask for too much. She learns, love is not safe. Love must be earned. And this belief seeps into adulthood like ink in water. It doesn't announce itself loudly. Instead, it colors everything. You find yourself drawn to people who cannot fully choose you, not because you want to be hurt, but because their inconsistency feels familiar. The emotional push and pull mirrors what your nervous system was trained to expect. Unavailable love feels like home, because your inner girl never learned what stable love felt like. So you chase. You overgive. You silence your needs. You stay too long. You try harder, hoping that if you just do it right this time, you'll finally be worthy. This is not weakness. This is wiring. You are not broken. You are adapted. The anxious attachment system is not a flaw, it is evidence of your incredible sensitivity and intelligence. It developed in response to emotional starvation. Your body learned to cling to any sign of love, because it once felt like life or death. But now, this wiring, once meant to protect, has become the very prison that repeats the past. You confuse nervous system activation with chemistry. You call anxiety love. You think longing is proof of connection. You believe the intensity of your effort means the relationship must be real. But here is the truth, if you constantly feel the need to prove your worth, it is not love, it is a trauma reenactment. Real love doesn't require you to shrink, to chase, or to beg. It doesn't leave you wondering if you're too much or not enough. It doesn't ask you to abandon yourself just to stay connected. Real love feels like quiet safety. But in order to recognize that love, you must first return to the place where your story began, not to stay there, but to understand the script that was written for you. And then, with gentle awareness, begin to write something new. The nervous system is plastic. It can rewire. It can relearn. But first, it must be shown a different rhythm, one that begins with you. You must become the safe place your inner girl never had. Instead of abandoning yourself the moment someone pulls away, you stay. You breathe. You soothe. You say to her, "You're not alone anymore." You hold her close when the anxiety rises, instead of letting it drive you into another chase. This is the deeper healing. It is not about finding the perfect partner. It is about no longer being hijacked by the child inside you who still believes love is earned through suffering. Let her rest now. Let her stop performing. Let her weep, and rage, and be seen, not as a problem to fix, but as a sacred part of your becoming. The girl who once begged for love can now become the woman who no longer begs, because she knows, deeply and completely, that she already is love. And the moment you return to that knowing, not just as a concept, but as a felt truth, is the moment everything begins to change. You stop chasing. You start attracting. You stop performing. You start returning. And love, it comes. Not as a reward, but as a reflection of who you've always been. There is a woman who once lived like a ghost in her own life. She smiled at the right moments, laughed on cue, loved the way she thought love was supposed to look, sacrificial, tireless, endless giving. No one ever questioned her devotion. But no one ever asked about her emptiness either. She kept going, because she didn't know she could stop. She was praised for being so strong, so loyal, so full of love. But what they didn't see was that her love was never free. It was a bargain struck in silence. A desperate hope that if she gave enough, someone would finally see her. Choose her. Stay. Then one night, she dreamed of a house she hadn't seen in years. It was her childhood home. But in the dream, it was empty. Quiet. Dust floated in the sunlight through cracked windows. Toys lay scattered across the floor, untouched. And in the farthest room down the hallway, she found a little girl sitting alone, drawing hearts on the wall with chalk. The girl didn't look up. The woman watched, heart tightening, as she realized the girl wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. She had stopped asking questions. She had stopped expecting footsteps to come. She had made peace with being forgotten. The woman knelt beside her. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and held her, no explanations, no apologies, no promises. Just presence. Just warmth. And for the first time in years, the girl leaned in. When the woman woke, her pillow was wet with tears she hadn't known she'd been holding back. Something inside her had shifted, not like a bolt of lightning, but like the slow melting of winter ice. Gentle. Unstoppable. That was the beginning. She stopped chasing people who kept her in waiting rooms. She stopped over-explaining her worth to those who only loved the version of her that never needed anything. She stopped trying to heal through connection, and instead started connecting through healing. Because something powerful happens when you stop seeing your inner girl as a weakness to hide, and begin seeing her as the guide to your becoming. You start hearing her whispers behind the anxiety. You notice her trembling voice behind your impulse to overgive. You begin asking, not, "How can I keep them?" but, "What does she need right now?" She might say, "Rest." She might say, "No more pretending." She might say, "I want to dance barefoot in the grass." And so you give her that. Not to fix her, but to be with her. Because when you return to her, you return to yourself. To the part of you that was untouched by the world's noise. To the sacred rhythm of your feminine knowing. The transformation is not in becoming someone new. It is in remembering who you were before you learned to hide. Your softness is no longer a liability. It becomes your compass. Your emotions are not chaos to manage, they are messengers from the depths. Your boundaries stop being walls of defense and become gardens of devotion. And the love you once begged for now flows outward from a place so full, it no longer fears being alone. This is what no one tells you about healing. It is not loud. It is not a grand announcement or a dramatic severing of ties. It is quiet. Subtle. It looks like not texting back when your hands are shaking. It looks like walking away without needing to be understood. It looks like crying in the bath because you finally allowed yourself to grieve the years you lost pretending you were okay. It is not always graceful. But it is always sacred. You begin to recognize the difference between trauma and truth. Between chemistry and compatibility. Between attachment and love. And when someone shows up who cannot meet you in your fullness, your healed self no longer panics. She no longer shape-shifts. She no longer tries to prove. She simply stays seated in her center. Because she knows now, love that costs your wholeness is too expensive. And she will never beg again. Not because she is bitter. But because she is home. This is not the hardened woman who trusts no one. This is the soft woman who trusts herself so deeply, she no longer fears being alone. She no longer fears being misunderstood. She no longer needs to fight to be chosen. Because she has chosen herself. Not as a defense. Not as an egoic badge. But as a sacred return. There is no war left in her. Only peace. Stillness. Radiance. She is not waiting to be loved. She is embodying love. And from that place, everything changes, not because she forced it to, but because she finally stopped forcing herself. The woman you become after you heal the girl within is not more lovable. She is simply no longer willing to perform for the illusion of love. She knows now, what is true will not require betrayal of self. What is meant will never ask her to forget who she is. And what isn't love? It falls away on its own. Because once you remember your worth, you stop clinging to those who forgot it. She no longer begs. She becomes. In the Zen tradition, there is a saying, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. This is not about passivity. It is about alignment. It is about the sacred art of allowing. Of no longer pushing the river, but learning to trust its current. There is a misunderstanding in the modern world, that love must be hunted, that happiness must be achieved, that peace must be earned through endless self-improvement. But in the East, wisdom whispers a different truth: what you are seeking is already within you. And until you stop chasing, you will not see it. In Buddhism, they call it Tathagata, thusness. The state of being exactly as it is, with no need to grasp or resist. It is not about becoming someone better. It is about returning to the one who is already whole beneath the illusion of brokenness. This is the spiritual essence of feminine energy. Not the femininity you were sold in magazines or in soft pink slogans. But the ancient, rooted, formless feminine. The one who receives without demanding. The one who attracts not through seduction, but through stillness. The one who doesn't run after love, because she already is the field in which love happens. Imagine the moon. It does not call to the tides. It does not scream to be noticed. Yet the oceans rise in devotion. The wolves sing their longing. Even the darkness finds beauty in its reflection. This is the sacred power of quiet presence. The healed feminine does not convince. She does not pursue. She no longer believes that urgency equals importance. Instead, she becomes a mountain, still, silent, unmoving, not because she has no emotion, but because she has learned that her center is not negotiable. In Taoism, there is the concept of Wu Wei, effortless action. It is not laziness. It is not apathy. It is the art of aligned living. Doing without striving. Moving without forcing. And from this place, everything begins to flow. The feminine in her healed state is not passive. She is powerful in a way the mind cannot grasp. Because her power is not in what she does, but in who she is being. And from this stillness, a different magnetism arises. Not the magnetism of performance, but the magnetism of peace. When you rest in this stillness, you begin to understand something the world never taught you: love that must be earned will always be taken away. Because anything that is earned through self-abandonment was never truly yours. Real love arrives when you stop bargaining with your soul. It comes when you no longer shape-shift to be accepted. When you stop sending energy toward those who don't meet you. When you no longer confuse chasing with connection. The Buddha once said, "You, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." But what he meant was not that you should merely accept yourself. He meant that you should become the sanctuary you once sought in others. Because the spiritual journey is not about finding the one. It is about realizing you are the one you have been waiting for. When you sit in stillness, you begin to hear your own voice again, not the anxious voice of your conditioned self, but the quiet voice underneath the noise. The one that doesn't beg. The one that doesn't fear. The one that knows. And when that voice grows louder, the world outside no longer dictates your worth. You stop trying to be the woman he stays for. You start being the woman you stay with. You stop trying to be understood by those who never learned how to listen. You start understanding yourself so deeply, you no longer seek permission to exist. In Zen, there is no need to explain the flower. It blooms because it is time. It does not ask, "Am I worthy of the sun?" It simply receives. So, too, with you. You are not here to earn love. You are here to remember that you already are love in form. There is a reason the lotus is sacred in the East. It blooms from the mud, untouched by it. It rises from darkness, yet remains unstained. Its beauty does not ask for applause. It simply reveals itself when the time is right. This is the path of the healed feminine. Not the path of proving, but the path of presence. You let go of what isn't love, not because you are unworthy, but because your inner world no longer accepts counterfeit affection. You stop responding to breadcrumbs. You stop apologizing for your depth. You stop being loyal to people who confuse your softness for weakness. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. Your energy shifts. You begin to radiate a stillness so grounded that others feel it in your silence. You no longer speak to convince. You speak only when your soul is moved to truth. You no longer fight to be seen. You become so rooted in your own gaze that external validation feels like noise. This is not arrogance. It is sacred self-remembrance. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." The healed woman understands this. She no longer argues for her worth. She lives it. And in that stillness, life begins to reorganize itself around her center. The wrong ones fall away, not through force, but through the natural law of resonance. And the right ones? They don't need to be chased. They arrive gently, quietly, like spring, because her frequency no longer aligns with winter. Stillness is not the absence of action. It is the presence of being. And when a woman reclaims her stillness, she no longer waits. She no longer begs. She no longer forgets. She returns to herself. And in doing so, she returns to everything that was always hers. Take a breath. Not the breath you give when someone asks how you are, and you say you're fine even when you're not. Take the breath that reaches the bones. The one that doesn't need to be seen. The one that isn't performing. Let the air move through you without force. Let it remind you of what your mind has forgotten. You are here. You are breathing. And in this moment, that is enough. There comes a point in the healing journey where words no longer suffice. The stories you've told yourself, about why they left, about why it didn't work, about who you must become to be loved, begin to feel hollow, like echoes in an empty room. And something deeper calls. Not to be explained. Not to be analyzed. But to be felt. That call is not external. It does not arrive as a text or a hand reaching back. It arrives as stillness. It says, "Come home." But coming home does not mean solving everything. It does not mean erasing your past. It means creating a space inside yourself that is wide enough to hold it all, the grief and the gratitude, the longing and the letting go, the girl who once begged and the woman who now remembers. Stillness is not a goal. It is a return. And that return begins in the body. Because the body remembers everything the mind was too young to name. Every time you had to smile when you wanted to cry. Every time you said, yes, when your soul screamed, no, every time you made yourself smaller in the hope someone would finally love you. The nervous system learned to survive. Now, it must learn to rest. Not by thinking your way into peace, but by practicing the presence you were once denied. Start small. Before you reach for your phone in the morning, place a hand on your heart. Not to fix. Just to feel. Just to remind yourself that you exist, not in their message, not in their gaze, but here. When you feel the urge to chase, pause. Notice the sensation in your chest. Is it a flutter? A tightness? A hollow ache? Do not analyze. Do not fight it. Simply witness it. Like you would sit beside a child having a storm of emotions, not to quiet her, but to let her know she's not alone. This is the practice of inner stillness. It is not a performance. It is not a ritual for display. It is private. Sacred. Often unseen. It is choosing not to respond to the anxiety that says, if you don't reach out, they'll forget you. It is choosing silence, not as a punishment, but as an act of devotion to your nervous system. It is letting the discomfort rise, and holding it like the mother you never had. Because healing doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop abandoning yourself in response to those feelings. There is power in doing nothing. In not reacting. In not explaining. In not rushing to make it okay. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself so deeply that others no longer define your truth. Sit in stillness. Let the emotions come like waves. Let them crest and crash and move through you. Do not build dams. Do not label them as weakness. Let the water cleanse what needs to go. Then, breathe again. Notice how nothing collapsed. Notice how, in your silence, the world kept turning, but this time, you remained in your center. You no longer leave yourself every time someone leaves you. This is the quiet revolution. Not grand. Not visible. But holy. You begin to reclaim your energy. Not by shouting boundaries, but by living them. Not by closing your heart, but by no longer offering it to those who refuse to hold it with care. This stillness is your altar. And at this altar, you place not your wounds, but your willingness to be with them. You practice non-action, not as avoidance, but as reverence. You no longer chase closure. You become the closure. You no longer beg for presence. You become presence. And slowly, the world reflects back your frequency. You notice that what once triggered you now passes like wine through open windows. You no longer rush into explaining why you're worthy. You simply are. Stillness is not the absence of life. It is the recognition that life does not require your constant effort to flow. When a woman roots into her silence, she becomes unshakable. Not hardened. Not cold, but radiant with the warmth of someone who no longer fears her own depths. And in this sacred stillness, the inner girl, the one who once waited at the door for someone to return, begins to dance again. Not for attention, not for approval, but because she has finally been found, by you. Let this be your practice. To pause when the world demands movement. To listen when the noise gets loud. To rest even when no one gives you permission. To no longer prove, chase, or fix, but to hold, witness, and stay. And when you forget, because you will, begin again. This is the way of return. Not linear, but alive. Not perfect, but sacred. Because the most profound thing you can do is not to find love out there. It is to stop abandoning love in here. The breath. The stillness. The quiet decision to stay. This is your new language. This is how you begin to belong to yourself again. Somewhere deep within you, beneath the noise of who you thought you had to be, a garden has always waited. It is not loud. It does not shout your name. But it remembers. It remembers the version of you untouched by shame. The girl who once danced barefoot in wild fields without worrying who was watching. The one who loved without holding back. The one who didn't know how to beg, because she hadn't yet been taught that love must be earned. And now, after all the storms, after all the waiting, after all the years spent looking outward for what was never truly lost, you have returned. Not to fix her. Not to rescue her. But to sit beside her again. You offer no conditions, no contracts, no compromises. You offer presence. And that is enough. She looks up at you, not with the eyes of a child, but with the ancient knowing of someone who has finally been seen. There is no ceremony. No fireworks. Only stillness. Only the quiet understanding that everything you once searched for in others was, all along, your own essence echoing back. Let the world spin. Let others come or go. You are no longer waiting at the gate for someone to choose you. You are already inside the home you built from your own breath, your own blood, your own beauty. You no longer prove. You no longer chase. You no longer fracture yourself to be loved. Because now, you remember. You are the love. You are the one. You are the sanctuary. Let them wonder how you became so radiant. Let them misread your silence as mystery. You owe them no explanation. You are too busy tending to your garden. You are too full of sky and root and song. And if you ever forget again, if you are ever tempted to beg, to bend, to become small for someone else's comfort, you will return here. You will find her again. You will look into her eyes. And you will whisper. You are already chosen. You are already whole. You are already home.